Hello, welcome to the Katerji show. I'm Katerji, and this is my show. Joining us tonight in our double edition, the special double edition, we have Shaun, former British soldier, Ukrainian Marine veteran, Mariupol defender. Seriously, one of the bravest, toughest SOBs I've ever had the pleasure to meet. We are so grateful to have you on the show. It means a lot so that you could take your time out to join us. You were supposed to join us on Tuesday, but something came up. You had a talk to give. Maybe you can talk us through a bit of that. But for people who aren't familiar with with the kind of work that you've been doing, can you maybe just tell us a bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my name's Shaun. I lived in Mariupol long before the full-scale invasion. I'm married to Ukrainian. My home was in Mariupol. I had a house on the left bank. I was in the military. I was in the Marines. I also was on my fourth routine deployment when really Russia invaded in 2022. And during that last 6 months of a 3-year contract to get my residency and citizenship, Russia invaded. We defended Mariupol for 7 weeks in probably, I think, it was one of the biggest battles since World War II. And then I was captured, held in captivity for several months where I was tortured, electrocuted, stabbed in the leg and starved. And then in a bizarre swap exchanged, in a deal brokered between the Ukrainian government, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and Roman Abramovich. And the rest is sort of history.
So there's so much to dive into there. Let's try and do it in chronological order then. So you left your service in the British Armed Forces and you moved to Ukraine, met a Ukrainian woman, and joined the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Talk us through that and then bring us right up to when the invasion happened and where you were when that began, really.
Well, I was a former Royal Anglian, a British military for 9 years, served in Bosnia. I did 3 years counter-terrorism in Northern Ireland. I also did an exchange before a second tour of Bosnia and worked and had some experience in SEER training, which is survival, evade, resist, and escape training in sort of Washington State in America, which involves really sort of learning the stages of captivity, living off the land, how to deal with yourself when you're in resistance in the sort of environment I found myself in 30 years later. So it's I had some sort of training. And then if you sort of fast forward, I had 15 years running my own business, which I sold, but I really was unhappy. When my son went to uni, I was able to then, after my relationship collapsed, I was then able to sort of reevaluate my life. And I wouldn't say it was a midlife crisis. I probably had about 4 by then, if I'm truly honest. So, it was something that I just probably really wanted to get some aspect of a sense of belonging again and do something worthwhile. And I got the opportunity to go to Mariupol, where I had a friend working as an EOD bomb disposal instructor, and said, if you're thinking about changing your life a bit, come out. So I sold my flat after passing the selection out there, and made my life in Ukraine. Didn't go home for 5 years after that. Met my wife in Mariupol. She was a deminer on the front lines, working for a civilian organized humanitarian organization. I had a house on the left bank, paid my taxes in Ukraine, was very much, a Ukrainian, essentially just born in London, learned Russian first, not Ukrainian, because of the sort of geographical location I found myself in when I moved there. And I speak a bit of Suzik, which stood me in good stead for when I was, captured after Mariupol. And that's really, the laws changed in Ukraine. I was an instructor for 2 years with National Guard, but you couldn't really sign a contract and get any sort of benefits from being an instructor with National Guard. And I was sort of married by then, looking to get my residency and citizenship. So I switched to the Marines and then became sort of the first foreigner to really command a position on the front line. Definitely the first foreigner to pass all aspects of parachute jumping and jump as a Ukrainian soldier. Got my wings, passed their blue beret test at the ripe age of 46. So I was doing all the things I loved again, super fit for my age, jumping out of Mi-8 helicopters and fast roping. I believe you had Danny Ridley on quite recently, and I was, doing all this with him and fast roping out of helicopters, which was pretty amazing at my age to get a second chance to do a job I really loved and really never looked back.
So that brings us to, recent history. End of 2021, Russia started building up forces around Ukraine's borders and through Belarus. Talk us through that. Were you one of those people that expected a wider war? Were you surprised that they came to Mariupol? Were you surprised how quickly they got to Mariupol? What was your impression of what was about to happen? Did you think that you were heading for the situation that you eventually ended up in?
Yes. The climate was different. Even my wife thought it wouldn't happen. And if you spoke to most Ukrainians at that time, generally, they were quite adamant that they were just brothers that argue and it was going to sort itself out. But got to remember, my military I had 9 years in the British military. I spent 9 years learning how to fight Russians. All those signs were there to say it was going to happen. I came back off leave in January of 2022, seeing grads moving into Mariupol city, which is a good indication because of the Minsk agreements that something big was going on. And already they were bombing 2 weeks before the full-scale invasion, softening up targets behind us. And the upsurge in artillery was just, considerable. So, and the technology changed weeks, maybe a month before the full-scale invasion. Suddenly it wasn't just, separatist, I use that term loosely, but separatist quadcopters, and it was now Russian drones, Lancet drones. It was, good high altitude reconnaissance drones coming in, and they got the facility to drop ordnance at night, which was quite a rarity. Never heard of that before until sort of, the weeks leading up to the full scale invasion. So suddenly those safe hours for walking back at night, they'd got thermal capability for their drones. So things were changing. And then you saw the vehicles with the Zeds coming in and they were moving them forward. So you sort of, as a veteran and someone that had experience here, you just knew it was going to happen. You could see it all going on around you. So yeah, it wasn't a surprise. We just had to wait for it.
Look, I'm in full agreement with you. Again, I don't have any military experience whatsoever. But I do have a lot of experience covering conflicts, particularly Russia's involvement in Syria, and those patterns were so obvious to me that's why I flew from London to Kiev on the 14th of February. Came with John Sweeney, our mutual friend John Sweeney, arrived on Valentine's Day. But again, I was very much in the mindset that I knew something was about to happen. It made sense that it was going to happen. And I agree that when I was speaking with the Ukrainians, they seemed really surprised. They were like, oh, no, if something's going to happen, it's going to be like a little incursion into the east, and it's going to be, hybrid stuff and so on and so forth. So you were expecting it. Talk us through those opening hours, days of the war. You ended up being on the front line in Mariupol, being one of the very last people holding out, besieged by Russian forces. That must have been a horrific experience. If you haven't seen the film 20 Days from Mariupol, go check it out. If you want to find out what it was like, to see what it was like, that's an Oscar-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning piece of art. But you lived it. You were there. You lived and breathed it. You were one of the soldiers that held out for so long. I remember I was in Kiev and I was reporting the news here, but all the questions were like, Mariupol, what's going to happen with Mariupol? And we were thinking about all of you guys that were holding out there incredibly bravely. So yeah, talk us through those early terrifying days of the war.
Well, I mean, I've done a stand to 1,000,000 times, to be honest, in the British Army. This time it was real. I mean, I did an interview with Sky just before the full-scale invasion, sort of saying, we'll give him a bloody nose. And Stu Ramsey was sort of saying he couldn't have been more accurate with his predictions. And I was pretty accurate because we'd had the intel. We knew what we were capable of doing. We'd been training them for 3 or 4 years. They weren't they weren't really the same military as they were 3 years prior. If Putin had come in 3 years earlier, it may have been a different story. But we'd done all those joint exercises with all those NATO militaries, and we felt pretty confident we'd give them a bloody nose. We certainly wasn't going to run. It was my home, my community, my wife, my family, my friends. We weren't going to run. And testament to the guys in my platoon, that opening day was just shock and awe. I mean, it was raining. It was so bad. It was the trench conditions you would imagine in the Somme, just traipsing through frost. And then when you go through that first layer of frost, it's just sludge and mud underneath it. And trying to work in that is horrendous. After what was shock and awe, mortars, artillery, APCs, they had complete air superiority right from the start. We had no surface-to-air missiles that could take out the aircraft. I mean, they were so outdated, the Iglas, they were just laughing at us. They'd put on their afterburners and fly away for it, and the missile would pop, And only sort of 3 or 4 days before the full-scale invasion, we started to get the Law anti-tank missiles. And I was the only one that had ever fired one back in the 90s. So positive. I was teaching my guys looking at the new optic, trying to PDF that, the new optic, with the only one of any experience, trying to teach my guys how to use a Law. Positively, I was like Gandalf, and they were so quick to pick up that bit and go, yeah, this bit does this bit does, let's go. They were on it, and that opening day, we had 2 T-72 tanks coming into the position, and they were on it trying to take out the tanks, and it's real. I mean, it's like SPG skimming off the trenches. I had a Dushka rounds coming in through my slit. It was just horrendous. And how we got off that position after 11 hours of fighting with really everybody in my platoon still intact, I have no idea with the amount of ordnance that came down. But that changed. We did a 5 to 7 day fighting withdrawal back from our positions in Pavlopil back to Mariupol, where we tried to hold the Russians, slow them down. And it was really, that was quite intense. And then we sort of really started to sustain some casualties on the way back into Mariupol. And that was our first real loss of a couple of guys, which I did a piece for Channel 4, I think it was, at the time, the media, and sort of had to make a decision whether I was going to tell the world what was going on, because when you're fighting for those first 3 days, you don't really have a clue what's going on in the rest of the world. You're just fighting in your bubble. And you're trying to ascertain and get as much information as you can. But when you sort of phone, the signal comes back in on your phone and it starts beep, 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 and 200 messages come through at once. And suddenly you realize you're at the tip of the spear, and you have to make a decision whether you're going to tell the world what's going on or whether you're going to stay under the radar like you should do as a good military man,
So, I mean, look, one of the questions that we all had watching that, obviously we'll get towards the end of the siege, but you were pushed back into a very small corner of Mariupol. You took shelter in the Azovstal steel plant, and in one of the most spectacular, things I've ever seen militarily in my lifetime, you held the Russians for weeks and weeks and weeks without ammunition coming in, without food supplies coming in. I mean, you had some daring special forces try and get you some stuff, so maybe you can tell us about that. But how did you hold off those Russians for so long?
Well, I was actually at Ilachar, but we were doing runs to Azovstal. So Ilachar is another steelworks that's just slightly north of Azovstal, and we were protecting the H20 highway coming in from Donetsk into Mariupol, and having lived there, I knew the area quite well. But we were expecting a full Russian onslaught to come down that road into Mariupol. But what happened was we were holding quite well on the east side as they were coming in from Russia. But what happened was they came up through the Azov Sea, and they made good progress quite quickly, surrounding pretty much all of Mariupol with it very, very quickly. And then, the last corridors up in the north were closed off. And then we were really trying to just drain Russian resources. And that's what it became about. But most of my guys didn't really know the situation because they were, I would say, I guess that 60% of my team was quite new. This was their first real operation. So while they were highly motivated, trained quite well, fit, young lads, generally their battle picture, there was only a few of us that really sort of knew what was going on. And we knew that once you'd got to 75 kilometers deep encirclement, 100 kilometers deep, they tried to get in. And you knew then that, by the time the decision was made to try and break it, we tried to break out. It was about 200-kilometer deep encirclement. Nobody was ever getting into us and get us out. So it was really, we'd lost all of our 3 BTRs, our armored personnel carriers. We'd lost 60% of our 2. My best friend Dima. I mean, we were hemorrhaging. It was just pound every day with guys coming in within 30 meters. We'd light them up as they were getting in, and then they would come back with 20, and then they would come back with 30, and there was no real tactical side to it. They would just follow the same route in and try it with just more people. It was just crazy to watch as a trained infantry soldier. But by the time it got to the end of April, the position became the end of March, it became untenable. We'd running out of food, like you said, running out of water. One of the battalions had to surrender. That left a big gap in our flank, and the Russians poured in through that gap. And they were taking up positions we formerly held. And the best way I could describe it, it was like the end scenes of Saving Private Ryan, when the Germans coming in through the building, the tanks were blowing holes through walls, and then the Russians would go through those holes, and then they would edge a bit further into the city, and then it became sort of real guerrilla hand-to-hand fighting in the city for those last couple of weeks.
So we're coming to the end now of the valiant stand that you and those brave soldiers put up. It became clear that you didn't have the ammunition, the supplies to hold out. That decision to eventually surrender must have been a very, very painful and difficult one. I'm sure many of you thought that you might not live to see another day, and of course, some of you didn't. Some of you didn't make it back from Russia, and you were put under incredibly barbaric conditions there. Were you all fearful for your lives, and how difficult was that decision to surrender, as it happened?
Well, technically, I mean, the steel plants are so big. I didn't surrender. I had the lucky, because of where I was located on the outskirts of the steelworks, I could get out. And when the choice came in, I was English. I was never going to surrender. It was never going to happen. So me and my boss that I write about in the book, we made a decision to try and break out. And I was captured about 2 hours outside of Mariupol, trying to avoid the drones that were coming over like Heathrow Airport. It was just drone after drone. And unfortunately, when you're going through the buildings to try and avoid the drones, you're opening up another problem with defense positions and what the Ukrainians may have laid. So it really does slow you down because you're looking for booby traps. You don't want to stand on a mine or trip a tripwire, so that really slows you down getting out. And unfortunately, I was captured just going over a brow of a hill by, I pretty much walked into a Donetsk People's Republic forward observation point of some sort, but I didn't see them. They were dug in quite well, and they fired a warning shot. And that was really a decision I had to make, was whether I surrendered or whether I tried to make a break for it. But it was broad daylight. It was the best day we'd had in months, with blue sky, not a cloud. We'd just been fighting in rain, snow, sleet and everything. And then suddenly the day we got a breakout, it's the best day ever. And I think I don't have any regrets about the decision, but I think if I'd have turned around, they would have just cut me down there at the high ground. It's broad daylight. There was a lot of them, and I just walked into quite a few of them. So I didn't really have a choice. We were told that we could negotiate the surrender or try and break out. And I opted to break out, but many guys in the steelworks obviously surrendered.
That's an incredibly difficult position for any human to be in, and I think we all just respect what you went through immensely, and particularly your decision, to try and break out. It's honestly, it's really awe-inspiring to hear. Now, we've got one question in the chat that I wanted to ask before we move into the really serious, heavy stuff. Spazalot is asking, what did you lose your APCs to in Mariupol?
Airstrikes. They just picked us up over time. The Russians at that point had got in behind our position through an area where I think it was like the 501st surrendered, which left a big gap in our flanks. So the Russians were pushing in through there, trying to get behind us. And it was when I went off to check our rear with some guys. We heard some explosions near our position, and my boss came back and just said, "Dima's dead. We've lost the BTRs. Everything's gone." So they came in, and we'd held out and hidden them quite well, and we'd had them for quite a while through Mariupol. But then once they've taken all 3 BTRs out, it was just really, we had nothing to fight the tanks coming in. We had no anti-tank left, so it was we had a. I started to prep about a week before we got the nod to go. I knew we couldn't hold the position for much longer, so then it was going to be every man for himself.
Right, so you tried to break out and you were captured by these DPR guys. Obviously, you've written about your harrowing experiences in your book, which we'll put a link at the end so people can go check it out. Please do give Shaun's book a read. But for those that haven't read it, can you tell us, or maybe even some of those that have, can you tell us about what it was like, what you went through, how long was it? Did you think that you guys would make it out? Obviously, that the Russian courts, you went through the courts and they sentenced you to death. It wasn't just you; you weren't the only British volunteer there. So yeah, talk us through Russian captivity as a British POW. Obviously, you were a prime target, getting hold of British soldiers. The Russians have this obsession with Britain. So,
Yeah.
talk us through what that was like for you to be living it, and how you were treated by your captors.
Well, the first part of any captures you're taught is always the most dangerous. Vulnerability and also unpredictability is your worst enemy. You may have just killed one of their mates, so at that point when you're captured, you do surrender. I did the death walk of 30 meters to my guys who were going to then take me captive, and it was quite scary at that point. But when I got there, they looked even more shocked than I did. I'd come up with a plan to say I spoke Russian and said, I'm English, don't shoot. And then I said it in English, don't shoot. Then we negotiated, and then I walked forward. But it wasn't too bad until they took me to their commander, and then they hooded me and bound my hands with masking tape behind my back. And then that's once they'd got me hooded and taped, that's when they started to really go to town on me. I was literally beaten in front of a commander, and then they handed me over to Russian regulars who then promptly stabbed me in the leg to stop me from running anywhere. How I know, because the DPR are really a militia that wear lots of different gear. They're not really military. They don't look military. They don't act military. They don't have the gear that the Russian regulars do. And these guys were operators. They had full Russian fatigues, fast helmets, pelter ear defenders, the mics and the gangster grips, and they had mag lights and chem lights and combi tools, and you name it. They had all the gear, but they just didn't have their patches on, which tells me they're either FSB or some sort of military police unit. And then they took me to another place where they strapped me into a chair and then electrocuted me on the fingers quite considerably 3 or 4 times without really asking me any tactical questioning I thought would come my way. And you only have to be shocked once, and you're out. I mean, the aftershocks are twitching. You're dribbling in your chest. You've got someone screaming at you. So you're sort of sitting there. You have to delay information. I had no really information to give them. We'd sort of given up the positions we were trying to break out back to friendly lines. So I didn't know where anybody was. So there wasn't much I could give them, but they still continued to then beat, electrocute. I was then could hear that I was going to be moved to Donetsk. Short time after that, I was taken to Donetsk to what we called a black site, which is somewhere where we don't know the location of, put in underground for 2 months, where I was, through that 2 months, I was electrocuted on the ears, beaten very badly. I wasn't given any food for 60 days, other than a bit of bread every other day. Occasionally, I'd be pulled out for propaganda where they want to show me eating a burger, saying they were filming me eating a burger, saying, look, we're looking after him. And then I'd go back and get another shoe-in and another beating, more interrogations. And then by the time I was captured on April the 13th, by the time June the 9th came around, I was then thrown into a trial. And before that trial, I was pushed out and by Russia Today and Russian news, state-run media as a Nazi, the mercenary, the terrorist, long before I even got to a court. I was being made to say that I was regretful. At the trial, I pleaded not guilty, myself and Aidan Aslin. And then we were told that we couldn't plead not guilty. So it was an absolute sham and trial for the cameras. And within 2 days, we'd got the death penalty. So that really, those early days are really systematic, system-induced pressures, but you don't really get time to think. You have to just mitigate the beatings, the electrocutions because of the medical, and there is none. We didn't get a visit from any humanitarian aid group. So there is no Red Cross. Then we were told before the court case that we wouldn't be POWs because we're mercenaries. And I was like, hold on a minute. I never actually left the country I had legal status in. I'm married to Ukrainian. I'm in the, I'm in the military. I'm a Marine. And under the Geneva Conventions, it doesn't matter where my motivations go and which country I'm from. If I'm fighting with a flag in the government's army, then I'm entitled to the Geneva Conventions. And they said, no, you'll go to general population. And I was taken after the trial, after I got the death sentence just before the trial, I got taken to Makivka 97, which was a general population colony. I was kept separate from POWs, which brings its own problems. The prison got a little bit better as we realized we had some value and they were starting to feed us. But by the time if you look at the timeline of pictures from when I was caught, anything I've got hair on, I've just been caught. If you look at the pictures when I was at the trial, I was down to under 60 kilo where I hadn't been fed. I looked like I'd been in a Japanese war camp. I was having bandages on my body, which they wanted me to cover up, which was from the beatings. And it was just you had to get through every single day. And it was only my wife's last call to me who said, live, fight, survive. That mantra sort of went through my head that really I just kept going. And when you're the only one that's had any training in any of this, you become a sounding board for people. And you can't really talk to the people you're in the cell with, because if you get dragged out for propaganda, they're beating up the guys in the cell to find out what you've told them or where you've been and what your background is. So nobody in your cell becomes your friend. Food becomes a commodity because there's lack of it. And so it's a really intense time, those opening 2 months. And then once we got to Makivka and the trial was done, it was more self-induced pressures. It was being locked in the cell and for 24 hours a day, not moving for 2.5 months from the same place. And trying to fight those demons that go on in your head when you're not doing any of that PR anymore. You're not doing the court cases. You're not meeting anybody. You're just stuck in a cell 24 hours a day.
So, I mean, look, that sounds incredibly harrowing. It's. Can you talk us through what it was like mentally to go through that, the place that you were in? I mean, you say the torture started basically from the moment they captured you, and I presume it carried on throughout pretty much your entire time in captivity. Yeah, that sounds horrific. I mean, did you think you'd ever be coming home? Did you think you'd ever get out of there? And talk us through that. And before we get to your eventual release, tell us about Steven Seagal, and let's try and lighten it up after some of the torture stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit, and I talk about this with NATO troops across Europe now. I talk about what worked, what didn't work, my experience. Hopefully, they can build better training programs to help soldiers that might find themselves in the same situation. So, I'm constantly talking with psychiatrists about the mental aspect of it. Learned a lot about myself. without trying to say, because it is emotional still when I talk about it, but because I've talked about it for 3 years, it's like sometimes it can come across a bit pedestrian, and it's not. It's gallows humor is a major part of getting through each day, finding humor in some of the darkest times. So, after 3 weeks, we got told we might have a shower. So, myself and the Moroccan who was captured with us, Brahim, we get ready for this, and we come out the cell. They put the hoods on us. They beat us up the stairs, throw us into corridors, chuck us into this shower unit. And then they say you have 15 minutes, which means you have 8. And then we have this shower, one drip is coming from the shower between 3 of us in this room. And we're trying to wash quickly. And then before we've even got dry, we didn't even have a towel. They put the hoods back on us, cuffed us, threw us back down into the corridors. Couldn't see anything. Threw us down the stairs, chucked us into the room one at a time. I was the last one in. Removed my hood. I look around and there's Brahim just laboring and breathing really intensely. And he says, I think I'll skip the next shower day.
You got to laugh. You got to be able to laugh, right? Yeah.
And he was just such a character through it and kept me going. There was people, everybody goes through ups and downs, but everybody's at the top is picking up everybody is at the bottom. And I was so lucky I did it with other people because we were able to pick each other up as a team. And unfortunately, they beat to death Paul Urey, who was a British NGO while we were in prison. And that's a pretty tough time to get through that because he's in the next cell and you can hear him struggling and laboring. There's nothing you can do about it. And then, the next minute, he's died. And you have to tell people it could get worse. So, and then those after the trial, we didn't hear anything about an appeal. So through the darkest times, through August and September, I thought any point now could be my last day. So I wasn't going to go down like that. I started to plan what I was going to say if they were going to shoot me, how I was going to end my life. Lots of things go around your head, and occasionally you do break. You do when the guys went off in my cell to their trial, I found myself on my own. I just really did collapse and just think, I don't think I'm going to get out of here. And the longer it went on, just thinking, I really don't know. Like you said, you touched on it. One of the surreal moments was that I was in the cell and we just heard Olenivka got blown up, and some of the guys got brought to our prison. They told us what the Russians had done there and planted a bomb, and to cull the amount of prisoners that were there, they were struggling to keep, control of. And Steven Seagal went to the Olenivka, and rumors went round our prison that he was coming to our prison. And I literally, in my cell, had to have media coaching to the guys in my cell and thought, if Putin comes in now with Steven Seagal, how are we going to do this? And the guys were like, oh, I don't know. So I gave them some teaching, some education that I had. Whatever you say is going to be doctored. Don't read too much into it. Keep be the grey man. Show people if you've got scars, you've got injuries, show them. So I found myself in this cell teaching them all the things that I knew about this situation we could be in if Steven Seagal turns up with Putin to have a look at us in our cell. But thankfully, he never turned up. But yeah, that's quite a surreal moment having that conversation in Donetsk,
So we've got a question from the audience here. Jimmy the Hat 321 says, how do you deal with the lack of justice? I would never be able to get over the desire for revenge.
Funny you should say that. Just been to a Russian POW camp. I think you could judge Ukraine by the way it keeps its prisoners, and that's one of the reasons I went. You can really judge that. I went to the prison really just to have a look for myself. I was invited by the Ministry of Defence and the people at the headquarters for the treatment of POWs, and they asked me if I was interested in going. So I took Aidan down with me, and we had a look, and really, that's the end part of their journey. You know, we had a look at the prison, and they were treated as under the Geneva Conventions. They had a shop. They could work and do structured work. They can do where they can learn, transferable skills like baking bread or fixing chairs, and that keeps the things I struggled with the self-induced pressures. That keeps that at bay. And if they earn enough money, then they can get something at the prison shop where they can get some treats. It's not freedom, but it's humanity, a bit more humanity. I talked to a few of them, which was quite amazing to hear their stories. I wasn't there to judge. I was here to listen to them. I was more specifically interested in the foreign fighters and what motivated them to come from, their countries to Russia to fight for Russia. And that was very illuminating. And the food was good. They got food and they were just in the last bits ready to go home. So the prison was like a world away from what I'd experienced in Russia. And even if somebody said to me, that's a show prison, I said to them, there is no show prison in Russia. Yeah. And there's 300 guys in there that are like in this prison. So whatever you think of it, it is a world away. It's the Ritz-Carlton of POW camps. So from what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are going to be people that doubt my testimony here as a war journalist, because I have, explicitly said that I want Ukraine to win this war and I support the Ukrainian people. Some people would think that maybe I'm not being accurate in my judgment. But if I saw war crimes or atrocities or abuses carried out by the Ukrainians, I promise you I would 100% report that, as I have done consistently throughout my career. The one thing that I will say, use this opportunity to say, is that I have never seen a military conduct itself the way that the Ukrainian armed forces do. I have heard far more stories of atrocities and abuses committed by British soldiers and American soldiers on deployments than I have Ukrainians fighting in their own backyards. So I need to stress that that you're going to hear people doubt the sincerity of the Ukrainians, but really you can tell how the Ukrainians are as a nation, as a nation state with an armed forces, by how they treat their POWs, and the contrast between how you were treated and how Ukraine treats Russians that came to kill and rape their children. It says a lot about what Ukraine is and what Ukraine is fighting for, and precisely why I'm willing to cross that line as a reporter and say we have to support these guys, because there aren't many opportunities in history where the fault lines between good and bad are so clear in the field of human conflict. It's a very messy field, as you know yourself. So look, take us up to, I'd like to hear more about your experiences in that POW camp, and you can talk to us about those talks that you've had recently. But before we get there, you were in prison, you've been tortured, you didn't know whether you were going to make it out alive, and then suddenly you hear that you've got this prisoner swap, been brokered by Mohammed bin Salman, Erdogan involved, Roman Abramovich involved, totally crazy series of events. Talk us through that from the very beginning, from the very first moment you heard something, from maybe rumors, rumblings, to the moment that you finally stepped out of captivity and got off that plane and found where you were for the first time.
Well, we didn't actually know. We were told that we were going on a long journey and we were settling in for the day. And from 3 o'clock in the afternoon through till, I think it was about 9 or 10 o'clock the next day, we were literally bound, hooded, beaten, thrown onto the back of a lorry where we sat on a metal floor in a caterpillar stress position, which meant that you had one guy's head through your hands and it stopped you moving, and you were linked into like 8 other people. We weren't given any food or water for the whole journey. And when somebody said, I need a toilet, the guard said, you can pee right where you are. There's no option to go to the toilet. And by the time we got their hoods off, I could hear jets, and we were people. I knew the area quite well, and I was saying, I don't know if we're going into Russia. We're not going on an exchange. We're actually going into Russia. And they said, how do you know that? And I said, because I can hear a Cessna or something. And it's a no-fly zone over Ukraine. And I could see bits of lights through my hood. So we were sort of talking about between ourselves about where we thought we were going. And then we could hear jets. And we thought we got to what we know now as Rostov-Don Airport, where a whole wing had been closed off for us. And even when we took our masks off, we looked quite good by the time, better than when we left the prison. But by the time we got to Rostov-Don, I was bleeding from a cut where they'd thrown me into the lorry. And then another American, his face blew up where they tied the tape and the hood around his head too tight. So his face blew up and you couldn't see his eyes. They were like slits. And then 3 of the guys lost footwear. There was another guy injured who had an asthma attack. I mean, we looked a right shit state by the time we got to Rostov-Don. But there was a guy walking around and we were trying to suss out what was happening. And they looked Middle Eastern. So we thought we were being sold on, which was like, you talk yourself into these sorts of things. And nobody mentioned it until the door shut on the plane. And he said, you're part of a prisoner exchange. And the old guy that was walking around, I said to Andy, who was with us, I said, the guy looks like Roman Abramovich. And he went, I won't repeat it, but he went, F off, Shaun. What's Roman Abramovich going to be doing in Rostov-Don during football season? And I was like, well, fair point. I'd got some things wrong before, but yeah, okay, fair enough. So we got on the plane and shut the doors. They said that we were going to have a medical check. We were going to Riyadh and Saudi Arabia. And then we had a group hug and going, what do we think about this? What do we know about, Saudi Arabia? And it's like, whoa.
So what was the first thought that went through your mind when they said you're getting a prisoner exchange? Was it overwhelming relief? Did you not? But was it disbelief? Actually, what was the feeling like?
Because we still had to get out of Russian airspace, and I think all of us were glued to the window to make sure that one, we weren't shot down by some air defense, and then once we got the nod, we were out of Russian airspace. You're now free. You're going on exchange. That's when we just broke down and hugged and really became, all the emotions come all at once because you've hidden them. You've really kept them in, out from anywhere where the Russians can get hold of them. So you've buried that for several months. With all that emotion just came out over the next several days. In prison, you don't feel wind. You don't see the sun. You don't feel the rain, you don't feel the grass on your feet because it's all concrete and underground. And so, those things, food became new again. I lost my taste. So after 4 weeks in captivity, you lose your taste buds because all you're doing is eating bread. So when I got home, a kiwi tasted like a kiwi again, and curry was just new. And, anything with spice was just new again. And, I could go to the toilet without having to ask someone or having someone in the same room as me, which was lovely, and, all the basics came back and your appreciation for life comes back at a real basic level. But the emotion, I mean, when I saw my mum at the airport, it was, really just burst into tears because we never thought I was going to get back out. Just there. Especially with us who've got the death penalty. I mean, it was just every day was our last for 2.5 months. And then when we did get out, it was like a big sigh of relief, to be fair.
Now, part of that was, there were conditions for your release. One of those I remember at the time was that you were supposed to stay in Istanbul, stay in Turkey, or that you weren't allowed to go back to Ukraine. Was that true in the end? Or
Azov went to Turkey. We went to Riyadh. We were picked up by our respective consulates and embassies. We went back to, within 12 hours, we was back in the UK. We really did get no obligations or any criteria that we were informed of that we couldn't go back to Ukraine. You've got to remember, when I'd spent most of my life in Ukraine over 10 years before the full-scale invasion. And for some reason, I was taken back. I wasn't allowed as part of the deal to be exchanged with the Ukrainians, even though I had legal status. And at the end of the day, I got home. I'm not going to knock that.
Yeah.
But the first thing I did within 2 months was want to get closure. I want to see my friends, ring my friends, find out who made it out, who didn't. I want to go and see my wife, who's now in Ukraine, and I'm in the UK. I want to go and see that. So, within 2 months, I was back in Ukraine. I got to admit, I was a bit nervous on the border coming back in, but once I got in, it was never any doubt I was coming back to just close that chapter of the book. Of, I mean, I'm 51. If I was 20 years younger, I'd probably get back into the fight again. But it took its toll. I've got a problem with my spine from captivity, problem with my shoulder from captivity. I've now got problems with my digestive system from the time I was in captivity and drinking all the technical water and not eating and going down to a weight that must have been about under 60 kilos. So I'm struggling still, even 2-3 years on, with conditions now from captivity. But I am 51, so I fight in another way now, running charities, raising money, and doing stuff on media.
So, I mean, look, that's an incredible story, and we're so sorry to hear that you are still living with those scars, both mentally and physically. But look, we're all incredibly all inspired by the fact that you are still in Ukraine. You are still working towards supporting the Ukrainian war effort. Not just you, Aidan Assin also returned. Can you talk us through a bit about some of what you're doing in Ukraine at the moment, the work that you're doing to help, Ukrainian soldiers and the Ukrainian people, and how people can support the work that you're doing out here, the audience back home that may want to, try and help you out in some way?
We do. I wear a number of hats now. Really, I'm ambassador for Chris Garrett, Swampy's charity Prevail. Him and his partner Courtney set up Prevail, and unfortunately, he died a month ago in Elysium. So I'm an ambassador, and I run sort of jumping in and out of operations here, running ambulances. We help and support the local infrastructure in removing or collecting casualties for anybody from near those areas on the front line and bring them back to the specialist hospitals they need to go. So we ran 2 or 3 ambulances from Dnipro. We also have a mine awareness and training part of that as well, which Chris ran. Unfortunately, he was involved in the accident last month. And then I sort of do a lot of work with the media now, talking public speaking with the militaries around the world about captivity and what you can expect operating in Ukraine. And the psychological side of it is becoming more prevalent now, which also I work with the veterans community here. Unofficially, I sort of talk about the internationals that come to fight here, the language barriers, the problems with culture, how they can get things done, and whatever problems you've got with a Ukrainian veteran in Ukraine, you've got it double with an international here, somewhere, from Britain, Colombia, and America. So I try and work on policies with that and the road to recovery and the policy for the 1.3 million veterans here that is ever growing. I really do a lot of work in the media, raise money where I can. We're doing a big drive for Brahim at the moment, who's stuck in Morocco, who can't get out of Morocco since he's exchanged. So he can't get a passport, or they won't let him out. We don't know, but we're now going to try and go down the legal route to get him a passport so he can get some justice here. We've taken Russia to court. If we're successful, we were successful in getting a verdict in Kiev. We're now looking to enforce that verdict for our treatment through the British courts, which will be really a landmark case that if we're successful, it'll be the first individual to really take a state to court for their treatment and win. So this will open the doors up for many Ukrainians who are been affected by the war, which will be, extremely welcome. You can't replace people, but some people have lost everything. Husbands, houses. We've lost, me and my wife, we lost our house in Mariupol. Russians have taken that, moved in, stole it, and made it impossible for us to go back and get it. So, if we're successful in doing that, hopefully it would change international law for the future, make countries responsible for their actions. And then we can start claiming against, or Ukrainians can start claiming against the Russian state.
Well, listen, we wish you all the best of luck with that case. Please do come back on the show and give us an update about how that court case is going. One, really important, not just for what's happening here, but for what's happening around the world. The Assad regime, lots of people have started taking the Assad regime to court over the last few years, particularly in Europe. The European courts are really good for that sort of theory of justice, to try and get some kind of justice in places that don't So we really support you. We really hope that you get the justice that you deserve through the courts. One question I have to ask though is, what kind of support did the British government give you following your release? And what, how is your relationship with the British government? The British government has a weird relationship with people that are fighting for foreign militaries. So I presume, because it was Ukraine, you probably were given a lot of sympathy by the British Armed Forces. But again, it's not something they're encouraging.
No.
Liz Truss aside, so have you had support from the British government? What's that relationship been like?
Well, yeah, indirectly. I mean, let's start with captivity. The Foreign Office were amazing in talking to my family. Liz Truss even wrote a letter to my mum about the situation. The Foreign Office was exceptionally good. I think they needed to be brought up to speed quite quickly once I was captured. But once they were up to speed, they were very good, and their crisis teams were very good. They couldn't do very much because we're Ukrainian soldiers. It was Russia was using us as pawns to try and draw Britain into the conflict. I wasn't anything to do. I was an enlisted Ukrainian soldier. It was nothing to do with the UK. Didn't stop Russia trying to use us as a pawn to draw Britain in. And that's what we could see was happening. So really, there wasn't much the UK could do. They were very good at informing my family of the situation once they got it. But, negotiations take time, and Russia wanted Viktor Medvedchuk, which would have been the guy who would have taken it over from Zelensky if Putin was successful in taking Kiev. He would have put him on the throne. So they wanted him. So we were quite lucky to get exchanged. But the Foreign Office was exceptionally good. We got Hostage UK were immense when we got back. The Foreign Office pushed us on to found us counselling with them. They still keep in contact now because they said to us when we got back, they don't have many success stories. So, they quite like to use this as a story. But yeah, I didn't have a bad time. They did what they could do. They don't have the facilities to give counselling really for the situation I found myself in. But there are specialist charities that they refer to, like Hostage UK, and who's Terry Waits, or a charity who specialise in captivity and counselling for that. So that was pretty good. But when I came back, obviously Ukraine paid me all my back pay and prisoner pay, and and when I went back, they would no end to the Foreign Office again, helped try and fast track my wife's visa through so she could get to, because I didn't see her for 3 or 4 weeks after I was exchanged. So while the visa was going through, and then when I went back to the UK, my life just picked up. I decided because that Russia had formed this narrative about me, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was in captivity. I wanted to tell my story. So Colonel Richard Kemp, who's a friend of mine, my old commander for my unit, helped me with getting the connections to tell my story about how I'm not a mercenary. I'm actually, someone that actually lived in Ukraine, paid my taxes in Ukraine, worked for the government, married to Ukraine, had lived there a long time prior to the full-scale invasion. I didn't come for the full-scale invasion. I wasn't a war tourist. I lived there. It was where I wanted to retire and spend my home. But Russia stole my home. So now I think people ask me, where do you get your energy from? That gets me out of bed every morning. So, that false narrative that they portrayed me as a Nazi, and a mercenary, and a terrorist, when I never actually left the country I had legal status in.
So obviously you were supposed to come on the show on Tuesday, but you had a call. You were speaking to Parliament. Can you tell us a bit about the work that you've done? Obviously now you're an advocate for Ukrainian POWs. There's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders now, not just to tell your story, but to survive, to be someone, to give testimony where some of your comrades weren't able to. So can you tell us a bit about that life that you have now, and what you're using your platform for, really?
Well, I mean, I never had social media because I was in the military. A lot of my following now is because I report from the ground here. An honest from the ground. I don't always just I pick up the faults as well as I do the good. I'm not just Ukraine. I want to win this war like like you said, it's never been a war like this, but right and wrong. I mean, they've invaded, they've taken my house. We're watching ethnic cleansing. I didn't plan on being in this situation. Russia put me in this situation. So I always tell people that Russia made me this. They've stolen my house, killed my friends. It's my duty, my obligation to now tell people the truth. That I am a Russian speaker from East Ukraine, just born in London. All those narratives that we're all Nazis and Mariupol's like Brandenburg, and Russia wanted to come in and save the Russian speakers. Well, they didn't save me or my friend or my family or my wife or the neighbors. They actually tortured them, stole their houses, and killed over 25,000 in. And that's a moderate figure in just Mariupol, including women and children. So I was there. Nobody can argue with that. So I do feel obligated to talk about it. I was invited to Parliament to talk at a roundtable committee in Parliament to talk about what you can expect if you are captured, how Russia doesn't abide by the Geneva Conventions. From really myself, John Harding, and Aidan Aslin, from first-hand experiences. We've got British, Australians that have been captured by Russians that are being held now. And we've got Russian soldiers that weren't born in Russia that have come from all over the world being held in Ukraine. And we should be doing like-for-like swaps. But for some reason, they're not included in the changes. My personal opinion is that, Putin doesn't want to really stop the conveyor belt of foreigners coming into Russia and being in the meat grinder, because he knows if he exchanges them, they go back to a third party, they're going to start telling people what it's really like. And that could stop the flow of migrant soldiers coming into Russia and fighting in Ukraine. So we do want to get our boys back, and we do want those guys in, the Russians, POWs here to go home so we can get our guys back. So we're raising the issue with these chats. We're bringing more MPs into these so they can hear these stories from individuals, first-hand accounts. So it gives them an idea that it's not just a
Oh, we've lost you there. I think. Hang on, I'll bring you back. He's right here.
That's why I lost you then. I took
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, carry on.
So I was just talking to myself into the ether, It's like, but yeah. So we are really just bringing survivors and personal stories into the committee rooms in Parliament, so the MPs can hear these stories, go away, and think about what their next moves are going to be to get our British colleagues, our American colleagues, our Australian colleagues back from Russia.
Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. We've got just going to see if there's any further questions from the chat to just put to you before we send you to bed and say thank you so much for giving us your time. We got one question here from Jimmy the Hat who says, do people in Ukraine have a hope that Putin's regime can fall, or is it just a hope that Ukraine can survive?
I think we have survived. We are surviving. I mean, if I go back a year ago, we didn't think there would be a summer last year. We had the ammunition drought, which was, now we've got those planes and we've got the ammunition coming in. So my own personal view is you're not going to see Russia win this war militarily at all. What you could see from what we're hearing and reading is that I could walk into Mariupol if the economic situation collapses in Russia without a shot being fired. So, you've got to have hope. I mean, hope's not a word I use lightly, because in the military you don't use the word hope, because if you use hope in a mission or an operation, you haven't planned well enough. So generally, but when you're a POW, hope's all you have. Everything's dehumanized, everything's stripped from you. Then sometimes hope's all you've got left. So you've got to have hope, because if you lose hope, then you've lost everything. So I think generally it's fair to say most Ukrainians hope the death of Putin, and they hope that Russia economy collapses. And I speak to someone the other day, and he said, I hope there's a civil war. We can just watch that. And so there is that. The will to fight's still there in Ukraine. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's making people angry, really angry. So, it didn't work for the Nazis. It's definitely not going to work for Putin. Keep bombing civilians in their houses and their homes. But we do need a goal. We're 2-1 down. We need to get an equaliser somewhere along the line, to use a football analogy, because you only just have to see what I'm a big American fan. I love America. All the way at Reagan, 80s kid, Carl Lewis, you name it, MTV. I was a massive fan, but it's really sad to see where Trump's taking America now. It's taking the oxygen out of the room. And we had Putin for 12 hours and we had a break for the night. Unfortunately, since Trump's been inaugurated, we've got 24 hours a day of crap. So, you got to have hope. There are some good Americans fighting for us. Adam Kinzinger being one of them, a friend of mine. And
he's a friend of mine too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. So we've known each other for quite a while, and he's one of our biggest patrons for our charity now, and Country First supplies all the volunteers we get. So we do have a lot of support in America and Europe, but we need to get some unity on that support, to be fair.
So listen, I thought I'd just give you the fight. Thank you for giving us a more hopeful note to end on. But I thought we could just end the show with you talking about your book, where people can buy it. Tell us a little bit about it and the writing process behind it, and hopefully try and get you some more readers of your wonderful. Your story is such an incredible, gripping, harrowing story. So I really think more people should be encouraged to read it. And another question, is there any potential for a TV company to come in and tell your story, an adaptation of it? Have you heard anything like that, or maybe not?
Yeah, it's on. It's public out there. We had a Ukrainian producer who wants to turn the book into a film. Tom Hardy's dad's doing the script for that as we speak. That should be finished in the next couple of months. Really nice man, and who's. We talk quite a lot most days about every other day about what it was like and the videos, and he talks to my wife about it, and so we have these calls, and then the book's really about my time before Mariupol. Briefly, I mean, most of it is about captivity. It talks about the battle for Mariupol and really the everyday grind of physical emotion. I mean, it really is a grim read, because it's the truth. It's what's happening. So it's not something you read to your kids at night. It's unless you want to scare them. It's true, but it's happening. The process, really, as I touched on earlier, was that I felt absolutely angry that I was the narrative was formed about me while I couldn't do anything about it, and I think it was right that I should tell my story, especially when I couldn't plead not guilty at the trial. And these stories need to be backed up by people. So most of my stories are backed up by social media accounts, messages, and pretty much videos and propaganda videos that the Russians put out. So how you doing?
Yeah, my microphone just fell, so carry on. I just need a moment to reattach it. Keep talking, Shaun. You're helping.
That's okay. So yeah, I mean, that's what it's about, really. It is about the grim side of being a prisoner. I mean, I was a big fan of The Great Escape, to be fair, and The Longest Day and those war films. So it's really good that I could contribute to the history of Ukraine at one of the most important times. And really, no, it's not going to fix it, is it?
I'm trying here. Thank you. Sorry. What a way to end the show, guys.
I'm trying to keep going.
Well, look, I think on that note, we can end the show. Guys, I just wanted to listen, guys, give us a huge round of applause for Shaun Pinner for joining us on the show. I really appreciate it. We are having some technical problems here at the moment. But yeah, this is new equipment, so but yeah, listen, everyone here thinks you're a legend. We're so thankful that you're able to come join us on the show. Please go check out his book. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put a link there below. I'll do it the same on Twitch. Also, please follow along, follow the Twitch page, follow, like, subscribe the YouTube page. It really means a lot, and we can hopefully have more of these conversations. Final word to Shaun. Shaun, we really absolutely want you to come back to the show to tell us about the court case, how that's progressed, and tell us about the film. If that gets made, we're definitely looking forward to it. So thank you so much, Shaun. Final words, if there's anything you could let to the audience at home know about, supporting Ukraine, maybe.
Well, you can support, follow people on the ground. Be careful who your sources are. Check your information. Watch for disinformation. Russia's flooding it with disinformation. But yeah, got to keep hope. Don't ever lose hope, and keep fighting. Keep supporting Ukraine. Try and get it in the public eye as much as possible.
Oh, we've got someone in the set saying you've got a YouTube channel of your own that you do.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I just started. Well, we did a documentary about our trip to the Russian POW camp, so we're going to put that out, and we're just starting I'm just starting a YouTube channel to really. It's not something I have comfort. It's not something I know much about, but I've had a lot of help from people and friends who have told me what gear to buy and how to do it, and they say your story's worth telling. So it's just started a YouTube channel here. It's just a Shaun Pinner UA, and trying to start sort of really document life on the ground here, what it's really like during the.
Oh, we've lost you one more final time. Come back to us, Shaun. Don't leave us on the note. Just waiting for that ping to notice. Nope, we've lost him. All right, well, look, I will bring us back to here. Thank you so much, Shaun. We lost you right at the end there. Live shows, this is what happens. We are still struggling with some technical issues. But look, really, thanks a bunch to Shaun Pinner for joining us on the show. Please do check out his YouTube channel. Please do check out his book. There'll be links for everything. If you support this show, if you support this channel, please maybe consider sending me some money on Ko-fi, joining the Patreon, subscribing to YouTube, following me along on Twitch, anything to help the channel grow a bit, and hopefully we can keep bringing you more of these shows along similar lines. Hopefully we'll get Shaun back on in the near future. I've been Oz Katerji. This has been the Oz Katerji Show. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do like and subscribe. I know I sound like a broken record, but we really need those numbers. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Oh, hang on, Shaun's back. He's back.
What happened there?
There, yeah, we lost you. There you go. You can close us out now with your final word.
I don't know what to say now.
Keep supporting Ukraine, etc., etc.
Yeah, I just said, keep supporting. You've thrown me now. Keep supporting. Yeah, don't lose hope. Keep supporting our charities. Support my YouTube. Subscribe if you want to watch the documentary. It'll be out in the next couple of weeks. We're just sorting out there. It's grown. It's nothing. The editing, we've had to get legal people in, pixelate people. You know what editing's like.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Like, and what was turned out to be like a quick YouTube post about what it's like in the camps has now turned into a full documentary. So,
it happens.
Yeah. So, it's taken a bit of time, but thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, look, maybe we'll collab on YouTube or something in the near future. But everyone, that was Shaun Pinner. I've been Oz Katerji. This has been the Oz Katerji Show. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, and Slava Ukraini.
All right, Slava.